On that stifling Tuesday morning, the movement in the New York City subway continued at its usual rhythm. Tired faces, empty gazes, and hurried steps. Among so many passengers, one man drew little attention. He wore simple clothes, carried a grocery bag, and walked with the slow, hunched gait of someone who has seen many winters. He seemed to be just another lonely old man. Like so many others, the great city had forgotten. Car 37 was packed, but no one noticed him, until 4 young men entered, laughing boisterously, showing off recently acquired phones of dubious origin and kicking backpacks in their path. Jerome Castillo observed the floor with his head down. At 68, he had learned that invisibility was his best ally. 28 years ago, he had left behind Galveston, his hometown, swearing never again to be who he once was. New York City, with its anonymity, had given him refuge. His small apartment in the doctor's district, his job as a night watchman in a warehouse, and his routine of buying vegetables every Tuesday at the Mercer Market were his entire life now. The scene began with small annoyances, pushing, tasteless jokes and provocative looks. The old man remained motionless, looking at the floor, but when one of the boys tried to forcibly grab his bag, something changed. With disconcerting serenity, he held the object firmly, looked at the aggressor and in a low voice uttered barely, "Don't do that." The tone was more icy than aggressive, but it was enough for the gang leader to push the old man forcefully. It was at that moment that the past, buried for almost 3 decades, began to emerge. Jerome's arm slid from his shirt sleeve, revealing intricate tattoos that rose up to his neck. They weren't simple drawings. They were marks of a life of honor, sacrifice, and blood. The silence in the car was immediate. 3 of the 4 boys took a step back, recognizing the symbols. The 4th, still laughing, raised his hand to strike, but never completed the movement. With a speed incompatible with his age, the old man disarmed him and put him on the ground with a single fluid movement, almost choreographed. But the true impact wasn't in the physical force, but in what came afterward. The subway stopped at a secondary station, and Jerome calmly got off, ignoring the phones pointed in his direction. The video of that moment went viral in less than 24 hours, generating sensationalist headlines: the samurai grandpa, the silent vigilante, the man with the forbidden tattoos. But for him, that was nothing more than a mistake. He never wanted to be seen again. In the following days, the old man's life began to transform into something he feared. Reporters camped outside his modest apartment. Young people appeared wanting to learn from the master. Some, more dangerous, began to ask questions about the past. And it's at this point where the true story begins. While the public's eyes turned to that mysterious man, other people, much less harmless, also took note. Old contacts from his youth, influential businessmen, retired police officers, figures with long memories and dark intentions began to look for him. Not for revenge, but for something more dangerous: unresolved old alliances. A week after the incident, Jerome was preparing his resignation as a night watchman. He knew he had to disappear again. His landlord, Don Steve, a man of few words like himself, brought him the newspaper that morning. "Seems like you're famous now, Mr. Jerome." "Unwanted fame, Steve. The worst kind of fame." "Are you going to leave?" "I have to." Steve nodded understandingly. "Before you go, someone important came looking for you. He left this." He handed him an elegant card with gold edges. He said he would come tomorrow at 11. The card simply said, "Congressman Henry Morrison." Jerome's heart skipped a beat. Henry Morrison, a name he hadn't heard in almost 3 decades. A name that belonged to another life. "Do you know him?" asked Steve. "A long time ago," replied Jerome, putting the card in his pocket. "In another life." That night, Jerome couldn't sleep. Memories of Galveston assaulted him. The cobblestone streets, the narrow alleys, the underground tunnels, and the Valencia Cantina, where a young Jerome and an ambitious Henry had forged a brotherhood based on rigorous codes of honor. Jerome had been the respected leader of a group of community vigilantes, silent defenders of a neighborhood forgotten by the authorities. Henry was his strategist, his right hand, his chosen brother. Everything changed the night of the mine fire. That decision he had made, that betrayal he felt from Henry, Those innocent lives they couldn't save. Everything exploded in a night. That marked the end of their brotherhood and the beginning of his self-imposed exile. Jerome had left behind not only Henry, but also Magdalene, his wife, and Lucy, his little 3-year-old daughter. He never heard from them again by his own choice. It was better that way, he thought, safer for everyone. The next morning, punctual as he had always been, Henry Morrison appeared at his door. Time had treated the former strategist well. Tailored, suit, perfectly combed platinum hair, bright smile of a professional politician. But his eyes remained the same, calculating, ambitious, impenetrable. Jerome, old friend, it's been a long time. I'm not your friend, Henry. I never was again after that night. Henry smiled, unoffended. And yet here we are. Fate has curious ways of reuniting old comrades. What do you want? I need your help, Jerome, for an important project, a project that could benefit many people in the marginalized areas of the city. I'm not interested. You haven't even heard what I have to offer. I don't need to hear it. My answer is no. Henry sighed, took out his phone and showed him a photograph. A beautiful woman in her 30s with the same furrowed brow that Jerome remembered of himself when he was young. Your daughter Lucy. Now she's Lucy Vega, a lawyer specializing in community rights. She works for an NGO that defends marginalized communities. Curiously, she's investigating an urban development project that my party is promoting. Jerome felt the world stop. Leave her out of this, Henry. I can't, old friend. She got herself involved. Just like her father, always defending lost causes. Fate has a sense of humor, don't you think? But there's something more. He showed him another photograph. A teenager of about 15, with headphones and a defiant expression. Your grandson, Michael, a brilliant boy, dreams of studying engineering. Enough. Jerome's voice was now a dangerous whisper. The coincidence is extraordinary, Jerome. Your daughter is investigating precisely the project for which I want to hire you as a security consultant. A project that could change the lives of thousands of people, for better or worse, depending on how it's handled. Jerome looked out. The window. The morning sun illuminated the chaotic city that had been his refuge for decades, a city that now, suddenly, felt like a trap. You have until tomorrow to think about it, said Henry, leaving a folder on the table. Here's all the information. My number is on the last page. When Henry left, Jerome opened the folder. On the first page was a headline, Tenville Doctors Urban Rehabilitation Project. Below, a photograph of his daughter Lucy protesting in front of a government building. The past he had buried now threatened not only to resurface, but to destroy the family he had abandoned to protect them. The irony was too cruel. Jerome spent the night analyzing the folder. The Tenville Doctors Urban Rehabilitation Project seemed legitimate on the surface. Housing renovation, community spaces, employment opportunities for young people. But between the lines, Jerome recognized the warning signs. Displacement of entire communities, territorial control disguised as development, and the shadow of companies with names that changed, but faces that remained the same. The next morning, Jerome made a decision. He wouldn't contact Henry. Instead, he would look for his daughter. After 28 years of absence, it was time to face the abandonment he had committed. The headquarters of the organization, Community Justice, was in a modest building in the Roma district. Jerome waited outside, observing from across the street. At noon, he saw her leave. Lucy Vega walked with determination, folders under her arm and a furrowed brow in concentration. She was the spitting image of her mother Magdalene, except for that gesture of intensity that Jerome recognized as his own. He followed her at a distance to a nearby cafe. When Lucy sat at an outdoor table, Jerome gathered his courage and approached. "May I sit?" he asked, with a trembling voice like never before. Lucy looked up, evidently annoyed by the interruption. Her eyes settled on the old man's face without recognition. "I'm waiting for someone, sir." "Lucy," he said simply. "It's me." The transformation on the woman's face was immediate. First confusion, then disbelief, and finally a rage contained. For decades, Jerome Castillo. Her voice was a controlled whisper. You have the nerve to show up like this after so long? I need to talk to you, it's important. Important? Lucy's bitter laugh attracted glances from neighboring tables. Now it's important? Wasn't it important when Mom was struggling with 3 jobs to support me? Wasn't it important when she got sick? Wasn't it important at my graduation or when Michael was born? Each word was a stab that Jerome knew he deserved. Your life could be in danger, he finally said. Michael's too. This caught Lucy's attention. How do you know about Michael? Have you been spying on us? No. Henry Morrison came to see me. Yesterday. The color drained from Lucy's face. Congressman Morrison looked for you. Why? He wants me to work for him on that project you're investigating. The Tenville Doctors Project. Lucy put the papers on the table. What do you have to do with this? It's complicated. Henry and I could have history. Of course you do. Lucy ran a hand through her hair in a gesture that Jerome remembered perfectly from Magdalene. The honorable congressman and the father who abandoned us. What kind of history could that be? 1. That I never wanted to reach you. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Jerome noticed that Lucy was repeatedly looking at her phone. Are you expecting someone? He asked. Michael. He should have been here 15 minutes ago. Worry filtered into her voice. He's never late when we meet for lunch. Jerome felt a pang of alarm. Call him. Lucy tried several times, but all calls went straight to voicemail. Anxiety grew on her face. I'm sure he's fine, she said to herself, more than to Jerome. He probably ran out of battery or is in the subway without signal. Lucy, listen to me. I don't believe in coincidences. Not after what happened last week on the subway, not after Henry's visit, and certainly not now that Michael doesn't show. What are you talking about? What happened on the subway? Jerome realized that Lucy knew nothing about the viral video. It doesn't matter now. We need to find Michael. At that moment, Lucy's phone rang. It was an unknown number. Lucy answered, putting it on speaker. Mom? Michael's voice sounded strangely formal, as if he were reading a script. I'm fine, don't worry. I was invited to visit the training center of the Young Engineers Project. It's amazing they have cutting-edge technology here. Michael, where are you exactly? The concern in Lucy's voice was palpable. At Congressman Morrison's offices. They offered me a full scholarship to study engineering, Mom. All I have to do is participate in a youth program related to the Tenville Doctors Project. Isn't that great? Jerome and Lucy exchanged alarmed looks. Michael, listen to me, said Lucy with forced calm. I want you to get out of there right now. Tell them you have a family emergency. But Mom, the congressman himself wants to talk to me. He says, I have potential. It's the opportunity we've been waiting for. See, Michael, please listen to me. I'll call you later, okay? The congressman is coming. I love you. The call was cut off, leaving Lucy and Jerome in tense silence. This is your fault, whispered Lucy, her eyes full of tears of rage. Whatever you did in the past, it's now affecting my son. I know, responded Jerome, his voice laden with guilt, and I'm going to fix it. How, what can you do? You're just an old man who abandoned us. The comment hurt, but Jerome accepted it as part of his penance. I'm more than that, Lucy, and I think Henry knows it well. Before Lucy could respond, her phone rang again. This time it was a message. Upon opening it, Lucy turned even paler. It was a photograph of Michael smiling next to Congressman Morrison, both holding what appeared to be a scholarship contract. The message said, Your son has a bright future, Attorney Vega. It would be a shame if your obstinacy with the Tenville Doctors Project ruined it. Congressman Morrison awaits your call. It's blackmail, said Lucy, her voice trembling. They're using my son to pressure me. It's more than that, corrected Jerome. They're using him to get to me through you. Who are you really, Jerome? What did you do for a federal congressman to go to such lengths after so many years? Jerome sighed deeply. It was time for the truth, at least part of it. In Galveston, many years ago, I led a community protection group. We weren't conventional. Henry was my second in command. We protected the vulnerable when no one else would, especially in the mining towns around the city. Were you some kind of vigilante? Something like that. We had strict codes, honor, discipline. We were never criminals in the traditional sense, but we weren't legal either. And then, what happened? Why did you abandon us? Jerome looked away toward the bustling street. There was an incident, a mine caught fire. Many families were trapped. Henry and I disagreed on how to handle the situation. He wanted to wait for the authorities, follow protocols. I wanted to intervene immediately. In the end, many lives were lost due to the delay. And that's why you ran? Because of a disagreement? No. I ran because I discovered something worse. That the fire wasn't an accident. That there were powerful interests behind it. And that some of our own men were implicated. I couldn't trust anyone, not even Henry. And us? Your family? Did you think you couldn't trust even your own wife? And daughter? The question hung in the air when Lucy's phone rang again. It was Michael. Mum, I'm coming there with the congressman. He says he wants to talk to you personally about the scholarship. Are you still at the cafe? Lucy looked at Jerome, panic in her eyes. Yes, honey, I'm here. I'll wait for you. When she hung up, Jerome was already on his feet. We should go now. No, Lucy responded firmly. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to abandon my son like you abandoned us. I'm going to face this, whatever it is. Lucy, you don't understand who you're dealing with. No, you don't understand, Jerome. I'm a lawyer. I've been facing powerful people who threaten vulnerable communities for years. I'm not intimidated by a corrupt politician. The determination in his daughter's eyes reminded Jerome why he had been the respected leader of his group so many years ago. The same fire, the same unbreakable integrity. All right, he conceded, but let me stay at least until we know Michael is safe. Lucy evaluated him with critical eyes, but finally nodded. Stay if you want, but don't interfere. And after this, I want the complete truth, everything you've hidden from me all these years. I promise. While they waited, Jerome observed his daughter discreetly. There was so much strength in her, so much dignity. Would she have been like this if he had stayed? Or was it precisely his absence that forged that indomitable character? The afternoon sun was beginning to descend when a black luxury car stopped in front of the cafe. From it emerged Henry Morrison with his perfect political smile, and Michael, a tall, thin teenager with a confused expression that transformed into shock when he saw Jerome sitting next to his mother. Mom, who is this man? He asked as he approached. Before Lucy could answer, Henry intervened, his smile widening upon seeing Jerome. Well, well, what a touching family reunion. Michael, let me introduce you to someone very special. This man is Jerome Castillo, your grandfather. Michael's face reflected absolute disbelief. His eyes jumped from Jerome to his mother, seeking confirmation or denial. My grandfather? The teenager's voice trembled slightly. The one who abandoned us? The one Mom said had disappeared? Michael, Lucy began, but Henry interrupted, her placing a paternal hand on the boy's shoulder. Sometimes, young Michael, families have complicated secrets. Your grandfather was an important man in Galveston, a respected man, even feared. Enough, Henry, warned Jerome, slowly standing up. Don't use my grandson for your games. The cafe was almost empty at that hour, but the few customers observed, with curiosity, the evident tension at that table. Games? Henry let out an elegant laugh. I'm just facilitating a long-postponed family meeting. You should thank me, old friend. Sit down, please, said Lucy, trying to regain control of the situation. Michael, sit here beside me. The teenager obeyed, though he kept his eyes fixed on Jerome with a mixture of curiosity and resentment. Let's be clear, continued Lucy, addressing Henry. What exactly do you want? Congressman Morrison settled into his seat with the familiarity of someone accustomed to dominating any space. Simplicity, Attorney Vega. I want you to withdraw your opposition to the Tenville Doctors Project, and I want your father to collaborate as a security consultant on said project. Why my grandfather? Intervened Michael, surprising everyone. He's just an old man. What could he contribute to an urban development project? Henry smiled with genuine amusement. Your grandfather is not just an old man, Michael. The video that went viral last week, did you see it? Michael's eyes opened wide. The one with the old man who subdued 4 muggers on the subway? That was my grandfather? The same. Michael looked at Jerome with renewed interest, momentarily forgetting his resentment. Enough, cut in Lucy. Michael, this isn't about internet feats. It's about corruption, forced displacement, and abuse of power. The project that Congressman Morrison promotes will evict hundreds of vulnerable families. I prefer the term relocate, attorney, corrected Henry with a condescending tone, and those families will be adequately compensated. With 400-square-foot apartments on the outskirts of the city, far from their jobs and communities, that's what you call adequate compensation. It's better than the slums they live in now. Those slums, as you call them, are homes with history, with community ties forged over generations. While Lucy and Henry argued, Jerome silently observed his grandson. The boy followed the discussion with analytical intelligence, clearly processing each argument. Suddenly, Michael spoke. The subway video. Was it planned? The question fell like a bomb on the table. Henry disguised his surprise with a smile. What makes you think that, boy? The subway cameras always work, but from that incident, there's only a video recorded with a cell phone. A video with angles too perfect to be spontaneous. And coincidentally, days later you appear, offering me a scholarship I never applied for, and that's conditioned on my mother changing her stance on a project she's been investigating for months. A flash of pride shone in Jerome's eyes. The boy was perceptive. Michael, began Henry, recomposing himself. Politics and business are complicated. Sometimes opportunities arise in unexpected ways. Don't treat me like a child, Mr. Congressman. I'm 15, not 5. The tension at the table was palpable. Henry finally dropped his mask of affability. Fine, let's be direct then. I need Jerome for this project, because his reputation in certain circles is useful, and I need your mother to stop hindering the development because it's causing costly delays. The scholarship is real, Michael. Your future could be secured. It just depends on your family cooperating. Are you offering me a bribe? Asked Michael with indignation. I'm offering you an opportunity, corrected Henry, one that many would envy. In exchange for my mother betraying her principles and for my grandfather working for you. Michael spat the word grandfather as if it were poison. Negotiation, Michael. That's how the real world works. Jerome, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. Henry, you were always skilled with words, but this time, you've made a mistake. You've involved my family. The veiled threat didn't go unnoticed by anyone at the table. Your family. Now they're your family. How convenient after almost 30 years. Henry leaned forward, abandoning all pretense. Listen to me carefully, Jerome. You're in no position to threaten anyone. You're no longer the respected leader of Galveston. You're a forgotten old man living in a miserable apartment. And yet you need me for your project. I need you for convenience, not necessity. There are others who could do the job. Then why me? Henry smiled with sufficiency. For old time's sake and because symbols matter, the legendary Jerome Castillo, working for the good of the communities he once protected, your image will validate the project before certain groups that still remember who you were. With your backing, many local resistances will disappear. Lucy looked at her father with amazement and confusion. What is he talking about? Who were you really in Galveston? Jerome kept his eyes fixed on Henry. Tell them the truth, Henry, not the version that suits you. The congressman reclined in his seat, evaluating his options. Finally, with a theatrical sigh, he spoke. Your father was the founder and leader of the Mine Guardians, a group of community protectors, let's call them that. In the 80s and 90s, when mining corporations and criminal groups threatened local communities, the Guardians imposed order, in their own way. We weren't criminals, Jerome pointed out. We had a code. A code that you broke the night of the fire, Henry responded with sudden bitterness. A heavy silence fell over the table. Michael was the first to break it. What happened that night? Jerome closed his eyes for a moment as if he could see the flames again. The Valencia mine. An explosion caused deliberately. Entire families were trapped. There were children. Your grandfather disobeyed the protocols, continued Henry. He decided to act on his own when we should have waited for the authorities. He ended up exposing our entire group, putting the whole operation at risk. And the families? Asked Lucy, with a trembling voice. Some were saved thanks to your father's intervention, admitted Henry. Others weren't so lucky. The explosion caused secondary collapses. What Henry isn't saying, interrupted Jerome, is that I discovered who was behind the fire. An international mining company that wanted to clear land for a new operation, and I discovered they had accomplices within our own group. Lucy's eyes opened with sudden understanding. That's why you disappeared. You were running away. Not just from them, Jerome responded. I was also protecting you. If I had stayed, if I had continued investigating, you would have been easy targets. And you preferred to abandon us rather than keep us by your side and protect us directly. Lucy's voice trembled with contained emotion. I was young and stupid. I believed my absence was the best protection, that with time, everyone would forget, even me. Henry let out a dry laugh. And look how it all turned out. You, hidden like a rat. Your family suffering your abandonment and me thriving. The irony is delicious, don't you think? Michael had remained quiet, absorbing every word. Suddenly he spoke with a clear voice. You were involved, weren't you? You were one of the accomplices of that mining company. Henry's smile froze. Jerome's eyes opened in surprise at his grandson's sharpness. Boy, said Henry, regaining his composure, you have a too active imagination. It's not imagination, Michael responded. It's logic. That's why you're so interested in having my grandfather on your side now. It's not about symbolism. It's because you need to control him. Make sure he never reveals what he knows, and now you're doing the same with this new project, aren't you? There's something dark behind Tenville Doctors, just like with that mine. A flash of anger crossed Henry's face, so brief that it might have gone unnoticed by anyone less attentive than Jerome. The old guardian recognized that look. It was the same one he had seen so many years ago when he confronted his friend with evidence of his betrayal. Enough, said Henry, recovering his experienced politician mask. This meeting has been instructive, but I have other commitments. Think about my offer. You have 3 days. He stood up with studied elegance. And, Jerome, old friend, remember that ghosts from the past have curious ways of reappearing, especially now that your face is on the internet. With that, Henry walked away, leaving the Castillo family in a silence laden with revelations and unanswered questions. When they were sure Henry was far away, Lucy turned to her father. I need the whole truth. Now. Jerome nodded slowly. You deserve it. Both of you do, but not here. This place isn't safe. Where then? Asked Michael, his voice softer now, the initial hostility replaced by intrigue and perhaps a hint of reluctant respect. I know a place, Jerome responded. Saint-Indefer. My old friend Gabriel has a bookstore in La Condesa. He has a discreet back room. He used to be a contact for the Guardians a long time ago. Did all your old friends end up in positions of power or as owners of prosperous businesses? Asked Lucy with sarcasm. Am I the only one who grew up with a single mother struggling to make ends meet? The blow was accurate. Jerome felt the weight of his past decisions with renewed intensity. I'm sorry, Lucy, more than you can imagine, but right now the priority is to understand what we're facing. We're facing a corrupt politician with influence, she said. It's not the first time. No, daughter. We're facing something more dangerous. Henry never acts alone. If he's involved in this project in the way I suspect, there are powerful forces behind him. And I just put you all in danger by revealing ourselves to him. The bookstore Pages of History was located on a quiet little street in La Condesa. The venue, with its discreet facade and windows fogged by time, seemed almost invisible among the fashion stores and modern cafes that surrounded it. Upon entering, the aroma of old paper and polished wood transported one to another era. Tall shelves filled with ancient books created a cozy labyrinth that seemed to whisper secrets. Gabriel Mendoza, a thin man with white hair and round glasses, looked up from his book when the doorbell announced visitors. His expression of professional courtesy immediately transformed upon recognizing Jerome. "By all the saints!" he exclaimed, removing his glasses with trembling hands. "Jerome Castillo. I thought I had seen a ghost in that video, but it really is you." The two old men embraced in a prolonged hug, charged with decades of absence. When they separated, Gabriel looked curiously at Lucy and Michael. "And these young people are—" "My daughter Lucy and my grandson Michael," Jerome replied with a mixture of pride and shame. Gabriel studied Lucy with eyes bright with emotion. "The last time I saw you, you were a little girl who barely knew how to talk. You looked so much like your mother." He turned to Michael and smiled. "And you have your grandfather's gaze, that way of analyzing everything, as if you were calculating the next move." "We need your back room, Gabriel," Jerome interrupted. "It's urgent." The bookseller understood immediately. With a discreet nod, he turned the open sign to closed and guided them between shelves to a door hidden behind a rotating bookcase. The back room was a warm and cozy space, a round, dark, wood table, comfortable chairs, a small kitchen, and walls covered with old photographs and yellowed maps. Gabriel prepared coffee while the family settled in. "We'll be safe here," he said, serving steaming cups. "This room has housed more secrets than all the confessionals in the city combined." Once seated, with the aroma of coffee creating an atmosphere of intimacy, Jerome began his story. The Mine Guardians began as a community self-defense group. Galveston and its surroundings have always been mining land. In the 80s, when foreign corporations began to expand aggressively and criminal groups to territorialize, the mining communities were caught in the middle. The police were scarce, corrupt, or simply indifferent. "So you formed your own protection group," concluded Lucy. "It wasn't that planned. It started when we defended some miners who refused to sell their land, then a family threatened by loan sharks. One thing led to another, and suddenly we were an organized group with structure, codes, and territories under our protection." "Were you like some kind of mafia?" asked Michael, fascinated despite his wariness. "No," Gabriel intervened firmly. "The Guardians never extorted, never trafficked, never sought power for power's sake. Their only goal was to protect those whom no one else protected." At the beginning, qualified Jerome. "With time, some members began to see the advantages of our position. Respect can easily transform into fear, and fear into control. Henry was one of them." "How exactly did you operate?" asked Lucy, her analytical lawyer's mind seeking to understand the structure. "We had a network of informants in each community. We worked with local merchants, teachers, doctors, respected people who alerted us to problems. We intervened only when necessary, using intimidation before violence, and when violence was inevitable. They used it with surgical precision," completed Gabriel. "Never against innocence, never excessive, always exemplary." "The tattoos," murmured Michael, remembering the viral video. "They're marks of rank, aren't they?" Jerome nodded, again surprised by his grandson's perception. "Each tattoo represents a commitment, a test passed, a code adopted. The last one, on the neck, marks the leader. It's only worn by one who has demonstrated indisputable wisdom, justice, and courage." "And the night of the fire?" Lucy asked softly. "What really happened?" Jerome's face darkened. He took a sip of coffee, as if seeking strength. "The Valencia mine belonged to a local family, 4 generations. It was slowly being depleted, but it was still the livelihood of many. A Canadian corporation wanted that land, not for the mine itself, but for what lay beneath it, a much deeper deposit. They offered to buy, but the family refused. The threats began, the harassment. We intervened, warning the Canadians to respect the community. But they didn't," guessed Michael. "No. They resorted to more sophisticated methods. They hired infiltrators, and at some point, they managed to recruit members of our own group." Jerome took a deep breath. "The fire was planned to look like an accident. It was supposed to happen at night when the mine was empty, but someone changed the plan. They moved it up to the afternoon, when there were full shifts working, and families waiting outside." "And Henry was involved?" asked Lucy. "I didn't know immediately. When we arrived at the scene, Henry insisted on waiting for the authorities, following protocols. But every minute counted. I disobeyed, went in with a small group. We managed to get many out, but not all. Jerome paused, immersed in painful memories. Days later, while investigating what had gone wrong, I found documents in Henry's office. Plans, payments, dates. Not only was he implicated in the fire, he had been the principal architect. He had sold our codes, our trust, for a position in the corporate structure and future political support. You confronted him, said Michael, not as a question, but as a statement. Yes, it was a mistake. I should have gathered more evidence, secured the support of other key members. Henry denied everything, said the documents were forgeries, that I was paranoid, desperate to find culprits. And many believed him. Why? Asked Lucy. Because he was charismatic. Because I had disobeyed direct orders during the rescue, and because, unlike me, Henry promised evolution, transforming the Guardians into something more powerful, more influential, more lucrative. So you fled, concluded Lucy, her voice laden with resentment. No, corrected Gabriel, surprising everyone. He didn't flee. He exiled himself to protect you and your mother. I have the letters to prove it. The bookseller got up and extracted a metal box from a hidden shelf. From it, he took out a bundle of old, yellowed and worn envelopes. During the first years, your father sent me letters regularly, asking about you. He asked me to watch over you discreetly to make sure you were okay. He even sent money, which I anonymously deposited into your mother's account. Lucy took the envelopes with trembling hands. Why did you never contact us directly? Because Henry began to watch you, Jerome replied. It was his insurance. He knew that as long as I believed you were in potential danger, I would stay away. And Mom, did she know anything about this? No, admitted Jerome. Magdalene believed I had simply abandoned you. It was better that way. Your mother was never a good actress. If she had known the truth, Henry would have noticed. Michael, who had been examining the photographs on the walls, stopped in front of one in particular. Is this you with Congressman Morrison? Jerome approached. The photo showed two young men standing in front of a mine entrance surrounded by smiling miners. Yes, we were like brothers then. And these symbols at the mine entrance, they look like your tattoos. They were the Guardians. Marks. Each protected community had the symbol carved in some prominent place. It was a warning to potential threats and a reminder of our commitment to the people. Michael continued studying the photographs, connecting fragments of a story that was beginning to take shape in his mind. Why does Morrison want you to be part of his project now? It doesn't make sense to expose himself by bringing you back if what you say is true. Because he's afraid, Gabriel replied. The subway video exposed Jerome to the public. If your grandfather decided to speak about the past, if he found support among former Guardians who still respect his leadership, it would be the end of his political career, completed Lucy. But there's something more. The Tenville Doctors Project. It must have secrets similar to those of the mine. Something he doesn't want us to discover. Jerome nodded, impressed by how quickly his daughter and grandson analyzed the situation. Exactly. The question is, what is this project hiding that would make Henry willing to risk so much? We have to find out, said Michael with determination. And I have an idea. The scholarship he offered me, I can still accept it. Absolutely not, Lucy responded immediately. It's too dangerous. But I would have access to information. From the inside, I can pretend to be interested, impressionable while I gather data. Michael is right, Jerome intervened, earning a glaring look from his daughter. Henry expects me to accept or reject his offer. He doesn't anticipate a counterattack, and least of all, one that comes from a teenager. Are you crazy? He's just a child. If Morrison discovers what he's doing, he won't discover it, assured Michael. I'm good with computers. I can access files without leaving a trace. Besides, Morrison sees me as a boy dazzled by his power and influence. It's the perfect cover. Lucy shook her head, but Gabriel spoke before she could protest more. If you'll allow me to suggest an alternative. The old bookseller went to another shelf and extracted an ancient book. Upon opening it, he revealed a secret compartment with a USB drive. I have contacts in the urban planning department. I've already been investigating the Tenville Doctors Project on my own. These are the official plans and the unofficial ones. There are significant discrepancies. Why didn't you mention this before? Asked Jerome. Because I didn't know what those discrepancies meant. But now, with what you've told about Henry and his past, I have a theory. Gabriel spread the plans on the table. Look at the underground structure. Officially, they're just foundations, but in the unofficial plans, they're tunnels, said Michael, leaning over the papers. A complete system of interconnected tunnels. Exactly, confirmed Gabriel. Tunnels that connect precisely with the points where the most important government buildings are located and, curiously, with the headquarters of Novatech International Corporation. Novatech, murmured Jerome. It's the evolution of the Canadian company that was behind the Valencia fire, and which has now diversified into urban development, technology, and, of course, modern mining, added Gabriel, with Henry Morrison on its board of directors. A reflective silence fell over the room as everyone processed the information. It's not just about displacing communities or speculating with land, Lucy finally concluded. They're creating infrastructure for something bigger, something that requires secret access to strategic points in the city. And they need my grandfather to manage security, added Michael, because he knows the Guardian's codes, has influence, in the communities they want to displace, and his participation would legitimize the project in the eyes of many. Jerome nodded, a forgotten fire rekindling in his eyes. And if I refuse, they'll use Michael as leverage, as they've already tried to do. Then don't refuse, said Lucy, surprising everyone. Accept the offer. What? Jerome looked at her, confused. Accept working with them, but with conditions. Buy time while we investigate. You can become what they fear most, an infiltrator. It's risky, warned Gabriel. Henry isn't stupid. He'll suspect. Not if we do it right, insisted Lucy. My father is the only one who can distract Morrison enough for us to act. Meanwhile, Michael and I, with your help, Gabriel, will gather concrete evidence. Not speculation, not theories, solid evidence that not even the Morrison name can bury. And then what? Asked Jerome. Take him to court. Henry has judges on his payroll. No, Lucy replied with a determined smile. We'll expose him on his own turf, during the public presentation of the project. The inaugural event, remembered Michael. The scholarship included invitations. It'll be in 3 weeks, at the Banamex Center, with national and international press. Exactly, confirmed Lucy, and by then we'll have everything we need. It's a good plan, acknowledged Jerome, but there's a problem. If we draw too much attention to Henry, you'll become permanent targets. We already are, replied Lucy, from the moment that video appeared. The difference is that now we'll fight on our terms, not his. Gabriel looked at the reunited family with an expression of amazement. The Castillos are still formidable. I see. Henry has made a serious mistake in underestimating you. The important thing now is to coordinate our movements, said Jerome. We need to establish secure ways to communicate, alternative meeting places, emergency protocols. Like in the old days, smiled Gabriel. No, corrected Jerome. Better than in the old days, because now I'm not fighting alone. He looked at his daughter and grandson with a pride he didn't try to disguise. Now I have a family. Lucy's phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. I await your response, Attorney Vega. The offer expires tomorrow. HM. Seems like our time is running out, she said, showing the message to the others. Are we all in agreement with the plan? Michael nodded immediately. Gabriel, too. Jerome looked deeply at his daughter before responding. Are you sure about this, Lucy? Once we begin, there's no turning back. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, she replied. It's about time the Morrisons of this world learn that they can't manipulate people like pieces on their power board. Then let's get to work, said Jerome, extending his hand toward the center of the table. Gabriel placed his on top, then Michael, and finally Lucy, completing the circle. For justice, said Gabriel. For truth, added Michael. For family, concluded Lucy. Jerome looked at the joined hands and felt for the first time in decades that he had recovered his purpose. The old Guardian had awakened, And this time, he was not alone. The following 3 weeks passed like an elaborate chess game. Every move, every word, every gesture was carefully calculated. Jerome accepted Henry's offer with specific conditions. He would work exclusively as an external consultant, would maintain his independence, and would require complete access to the security plans and community relocation. Henry, satisfied with what he considered a victory, agreed to everything. Meanwhile, Michael became the exemplary scholarship recipient. He attended all preparation meetings, showed enthusiasm for every aspect of the project, and earned the trust, not only of Henry, but also of his closest team. With his youthful appearance and apparent naivete, no one suspected that each night he transferred confidential documents to a USB drive hidden in his digital watch. Lucy, for her part, publicly moderated her opposition to the project. She announced that, although she maintained reservations, she was willing to dialogue to find solutions that would truly benefit the affected communities. This change in stance disconcerted her activist colleagues, but gained her access to negotiation, meetings she had not been invited to before. Gabriel mobilized his network of old contacts: librarians, archivists, retired municipal employees, people invisible to power, but with access to valuable information. Slowly, the puzzle began to complete itself. The morning of the inaugural event, the four met again in the bookstore's back room. On the table rested a complete digital file: hidden contracts, suspicious bank transfers, alternative plans, compromising emails. The evidence was overwhelming. Novatech isn't just planning to build tunnels, explained Michael, showing digital maps on his laptop. They're creating an entire underground infrastructure with privileged access to the city's water, electricity, and telecommunications network. Basically, they could control essential services for half the city. And the evictions aren't for urban development itself, continued Lucy, pointing to legal documents. It's because those communities are located exactly above the entry points to that underground network. They need them out to keep their operations secret. It's brilliant in a twisted way, admitted Jerome, using an urban renewal project as cover to build a system of long-term strategic control. Are you prepared for today? Asked Gabriel, nervously adjusting his glasses. Once this begins, there's no turning back, completed Lucy. We know. The Banamex Center shone that night. The political, business, and social elite of New York had gathered for the presentation of the Tenville Doctors Urban Rehabilitation Model Project. Spotlights, red carpet, champagne, and canapes, all the spectacle of power gathered under one roof. On the main stage, Henry Morrison smiled with the confidence that only decades of impunity can grant. Beside him, the executives of Novatech and other associated corporations nodded with pleasure, as renders of modern buildings and green areas that would replace what they called deteriorated zones were presented. Among the audience, Lucy Vega observed the spectacle with a neutral countenance. Beside her, Michael pretended to take enthusiastic notes on his tablet, and in a discreet corner, Jerome Castillo, wearing a formal suit for the first time in decades, waited for his moment. And now, announced the Master of Ceremonies, I am pleased to introduce a special collaborator on this project, her man whose wisdom and experience will ensure that community transitions are carried out with the utmost respect and dignity, Mr. Jerome Castillo, specialist in community mediation. The applause was courteous, but lukewarm. Few recognized that name. Only some older faces among the audience showed expressions of surprise or concern. Jerome went up to the stage with a slow but firm step. The light from the spotlights illuminated his face, furrowed by time, but with eyes that burned with renewed determination. Thank you, he began with a measured voice. My collaboration with this project arises from a deep commitment to vulnerable communities, a commitment I have maintained throughout my life, though not always in evident ways. From his seat, Henry smiled with satisfaction, interpreting those words as a surrender, a final acceptance that institutional power would always prevail over idealists. Almost 30 years ago, continued Jerome, in Galveston, I witnessed how corporate interests destroyed entire communities in the name of progress. I witnessed betrayals, how power corrupts even those who were once defenders of the people. Henry's smile began to fade. One of his advisors leaned in to whisper something in his ear. Today, I see the same patterns repeating themselves, the same actors with different masks, the same greed disguised as development, the same methods of manipulation and displacement. Uneasy murmurs began to spread through the audience. Henry made a gesture for technicians to cut the microphone, but at that precise moment, the giant screens showing renders of the project suddenly changed. Michael had hacked the audio-visual system. Now the screens showed documents, contracts, maps of the tunnels, scanned emails, the complete evidence of the true purpose of the Tenville Doctors project. "This is sabotage," shouted Henry, standing up. "Security!" But it was too late. Lucy had already distributed folders with all the documentation among the journalists present. Gabriel had discreetly blocked the side doors to delay security's entrance, and Michael was broadcasting everything live through social media. "This project does not seek to rehabilitate Tenville or doctors," continued Jerome, his voice now amplified by the sound system that Michael had taken control of. "It seeks to create a network of strategic control over essential services of the city, displacing entire communities to hide its true intentions. Just like 30 years ago at the Valencia mine, when innocent families suffered so that corporations like Novatech could expand their operations." Chaos broke out in the hall. Journalists frantically took photographs, investors tried to leave the place, politicians physically distanced themselves from Henry like rats abandoning a sinking ship. But the culminating moment came when Lucy went up to the stage, positioning herself next to her father. "As legal representative of the communities of Tenville and Doctors," she announced with a clear and powerful voice, "I formally announce a class action lawsuit against Novatech International and all officials implicated in this scheme, and as director of the newly created Autonomous Community Project, I present an alternative, developed by and for the inhabitants of these areas." On the screens appeared new plans, a real urban rehabilitation project that preserved the essence of the communities while improving infrastructure, public spaces, and local economic opportunities. "This is real development," affirmed Lucy. "One that serves people, not corporations." Suddenly a voice resonated from the back of the hall. "Lies! All this is a personal vendetta from Castillo." It was Henry, struggling to regain control. "This man abandoned his family. He betrayed his own companions. And now you pretend to believe him?" Jerome remained impassive, but Michael then took the microphone. "My grandfather made mistakes, yes. He believed that by distancing himself, he would protect his family when the real dangers people like. You, Mr. Morrison, continued lurking in the shadows, but unlike you, he has had the courage to face his mistakes and seek redemption." The young man showed on screen the last piece of evidence, documents directly linking Henry to the Valencia mine fire, with notarized testimonies from former guardians who, contacted by Gabriel, had finally decided to tell the truth. Cornered, Henry attempted a desperate exit. He approached Jerome and whispered with a venomous voice, "You may have exposed me, old friend, but remember that I'm not the only one with power. There are others who will continue what we have begun, and your family will remain a target just like 30 years ago." Jerome looked him directly in the eyes without fear. "The difference, Henry, is that this time I'm not alone, and that you no longer have anywhere to hide." At that moment, the main doors opened, and several older men entered, some with canes, others with grey hair, but all with the same determined look. Former mine guardians gathered by Gabriel, who came to support their leader and testify against Henry. "It's over," Jerome said simply. The consequences were immediate. Novatech lost 40% of its stock value that very night. Henry Morrison was arrested while trying to board a private flight to the Cayman Islands. Several officials submitted their resignations before their names appeared in the media. But the real transformation occurred in Tenville and Doctors. The Autonomous Community Project, led by Lucy and backed by international foundations that became interested after the scandal, began to implement real improvements respecting the existing social fabric. A month later, Jerome walked through the streets of Tenville. He no longer tried to go unnoticed. He greeted the neighbors who recognized him as the Guardian, a nickname that had spontaneously emerged after the events. Beside him, Michael documented everything with his camera for a community blog he had created. "Don't you regret having come out of the shadows?" the teenager asked his grandfather. "Sometimes," admitted Jerome, "invisibility has its advantages, but also its costs. I lost 3 decades with you and your mother by believing that by distancing myself, I was protecting you. But you found us again. Or you found me." They arrived at a newly renovated small plaza where Lucy was directing a neighborhood meeting. Upon seeing her father and son, she smiled and signaled for them to come closer. Just in time, she said, "We're discussing where to locate the new community center." Jerome observed the map spread out on an improvised table. Neighbors of all ages gave opinions, pointed, debated with passion but respect. It was a living community, defending its right to exist and prosper on its own terms. "You know what?" he said to his daughter. "This reminds me of the early days, how of the Guardians, before everything got complicated, when it was really about protecting the community, giving it a voice." "The difference," replied Lucy, "is that now we do it in broad daylight, without secrets, without mysterious tattoos, without hidden hierarchies, and without abandonment," added Michael, looking significantly at his grandfather. Jerome nodded, accepting the pang of guilt as a necessary part of his redemption. "Without abandonment," he confirmed. That night, in the small apartment that the three now shared, Jerome found Michael writing intensely on his computer. "Homework?" he asked. "No," replied the teenager. "I'm writing our story, from Galveston until today. I think it's important that it be recorded." "Why?" "Because it shows that it's never too late to correct mistakes, that families can heal, that guardians can return from the shadows." Michael paused and looked at his grandfather. "I'm titling it The Man Who Won Without Raising His Voice." Jerome smiled, remembering how it had all begun with a simple, "Don't do that," in a subway car. Soft words, but with the strength of deep convictions behind them. "I like that title," he finally said, "although the victory wasn't just mine." "I know," replied Michael. "It was all of ours, of the family we formed." From the kitchen, Lucy observed the scene with a mixture of tenderness and amazement. The wound of abandonment still hurt sometimes, but each day it healed a little more. Her father wasn't the perfect hero that a little girl would have wished for, but he was perhaps something more valuable, a real man, with mistakes and successes, willing to fight for his redemption. In the streets of Tenville, people began to tell stories about the Guardian of Galveston, who had come to protect them. Some swore they had seen his tattoos glow in the dark. Others assured that he could detect lies just by looking into your eyes. Urban legends that Jerome found amusing, but unnecessary. The truth was simpler and deeper. A man who had fled from his past for decades had finally found the courage to face it, not with violence or revenge, but with truth and justice. And in the process, he had rediscovered the most valuable thing he had lost, his family. As Lucy served dinner and Michael put away his computer, Jerome thought about the grocery bag he had been carrying that day on the subway, a symbol of his simple and anonymous life that he would never recover. But in exchange, he had gained something much more precious, a new purpose, a new community to protect, and above all, a reunited family. The old Guardian had returned from the shadows, and this time he would stay.